we've got some major AI news that I'm sure we'll be hearing more about in coming weeks. Mustafa Suleyman, the co founder and CEO of Inflection AI and a former co founder of Google DeepMind, is leaving Inflection to start Microsoft AI, which is a new division at Microsoft that will bring together their consumer AI efforts as well as Copilot, Bing, and Edge. As part of this move, Microsoft has also hired most of Inflection's staff. Inflection as a company says it will continue with a new CEO, but it will not have its founder and much of its talent. Now, the company said in a blog post that its plan moving forward is to, quote, lean into our AI studio business, where custom generative AI models are crafted, tested, and fine tuned for commercial customers. Now, this is a huge deal. And I want to, as we unpack this, it's kind of helpful to remember some of the context here. Inflection is a giant in AI. It had raised 1.5 billion from investors, and those investors included Microsoft. Their main consumer facing product was Pi, which they built as the first emotionally intelligent AI assistant. So they're trying to essentially compete in a consumer context with the open AIs of the world. Also relevant here is that Reid Hoffman of LinkedIn fame was a co founder of Inflection and sits on Microsoft's board. So, Paul, there is a lot to unpack here, but let's start with what does this kind of mean in context and what does this mean for the overall AI ecosystem?
Yeah, it's ironic because we just talked about Pi last week, and I think it was last week or the
Yeah,
week before, I
yeah,
was sharing, like, I was actually kind of enjoying the new model. I'd only play with it the one time, but it was, pretty cool. I think it, like, as to build on the previous topic, it is a tale of caution, for sure, as a user, as a company or an individual, personally, professionally. Um, if you were enjoying Pi and it had become like a
mm,
daily tool for you, whether it was a coach, advisor, therapist, friend, mentor, whatever, however you were using Pi, what happens now? Like, are they going to at some point realize this studio thing is just like it's just PR and this is not going to work, and Microsoft just eventually absorbs them? Is there some deal where they get the data in this non-acquisition? I mean, in essence, it's an acquisition without actually buying the company.
right.
Um, so if let's say you've been having experimenting with Pi for the last 6 months as a friend, like just talking to it, seeing how it works. Does Microsoft get that data? Like, what happens to all that personal information you were talking to Pi about? And
Mm,
so again, I'm not saying Pi in particular. I'm saying, like, this is what happens. Like, we come to trust these AI tools, these AI companies, but what happens to the data? What happens when the company goes away and you don't have that tool, or they do just get acquired and they just shut down and sunset the product? So I think, again, it's just a bit of a cautionary tale of this is a very dynamic space we're living through, and it's just starting. Um, Couple other things that I found interesting was, again, building on the previous topic, further evidence that we will likely end up having a small collection of dominant companies, dominant models. They had, as you said, $1.5 billion, and they raised that like in the last 12 months,
yeah.
and it's just gone basically. One interesting note was they are rumored to have 22,000 NVIDIA GPUs.
Hmm.
The going rate for those GPUs is, give or take, around $30,000 per GPU. 30,000 times 22,000 GPUs is 660 million. There's an article in the information yesterday that said in this exchange, Microsoft was paying 650 million to Inflection. Kind of real close numbers that maybe Microsoft basically is just getting the talent and the GPUs from NVIDIA, um, in exchange for whatever. So, yeah, and then like you said, there's just so much intrigue here. There's a potential conflict with OpenAI. I mean, they're competitors, and
Yeah.
Microsoft's the biggest investor in OpenAI. So what happens there? Um, Microsoft now has a Microsoft AI division, which I thought they previously had, but apparently they didn't. So now they have one, and Mustafa is the CEO of it, which is a shakeup to all the other AI talent at Microsoft, I would assume. So there's
Mm,
that whole thing. And then the one that I just immediately thought of when I saw this was, isn't this what Sam and Greg were going to go do? So when Sam got fired that weekend, it was like, what, a Thursday or Friday, by Saturday night, Satya Nadella said, Sam and Greg are going to come work with us. We're going to take, their team, and we're going to build an AI division with Sam and Greg at the core of it. So in essence, Satya got the consolation prize. Like, oh, okay, Sam went back to OpenAI. All right, fine. We'll take Mustafa and we'll build a division around him. So I don't know, man. It's so fascinating. This stuff it is like a soap opera. I know people comment all the time about the podcast. It's like, in essence, we're
Good.
reporting on these soap operas, and this is definitely one of them. And I'm sure there's way more to this story than has currently been reported.
Well, as you noted too, it's a pretty interesting and potentially repeatable playbook where someone, instead of having to acquire the full company, is essentially getting all the parts of the machine and leaving the
Right.
shell of it behind, right?
Right. Yep.
So, as part of all of this commentary around a guy named Gavin Baker, who's a really sharp AI commentator at Atreides Capital, he posted a thread on X about the long term implications of this. And he started it out by saying, quote, inflection will likely be the first of many VC backed foundation model companies to fail. Foundation models without proprietary real time data and massive distribution for reinforcement learning with human feedback, RLHF, are the fastest depreciating assets in history. I think we have discussed some of his commentary before on this subject. Do
Yeah.
you find any truth in that?
Yeah, I mean, it's what we just said on the previous topic. Like, if you don't have data and all you have is a model and computing power and some talent
Yeah.
and some VC money, it's only going to get so far unless you find some massive differentiator, some market that no one else is in. Like, I don't know what it is. I haven't sat down and thought deeply enough about it, but um, yeah, it's a very challenging environment to invest. Like, as someone who does some angel investing, some personal investing, like I would have a real hard time making personal bets on model companies right now. It's just such a unknown, and it's really, really hard to bet against the big players that they aren't gonna just dominate everything. So, yeah, I would have a hard time disputing what Gavin's saying there.